Your boys are back. Paul Finebaum, Matt Barrie, ESPN College Football YouTube channels. We sit here on Sunday mornings and recap the Saturday that was. Paul, are you gonna be? How are you gonna be today? Like, walk me. How's the mindset coming into the Week 6 recap, Paul?
Well, it's about the game that we tried everything in our power not to talk about. I mean, we're almost back to where we were a year ago this morning, Matt, when nobody cared about the Bama A&M game, and then it was the only topic. And this game is going to be a topic for a couple of reasons, and I think it starts with Alabama and Milrow, and where is Bryce Young as we turn the page to Tennessee. And the most important thing I distilled from this game was a late night tweet by Johnny Manziel,
Oh
who was
no.
the, who was the star of this game 10 years ago. And had he not tweeted anything, I think Aggies would feel pretty good. Hey, what an effort, blah blah blah. But the fact that Manziel, the most famous Aggie ever, tweeted as the game ended that's the worst play call he has ever seen, and it was a joke, I think is going to resonate pretty loudly in the world of Aggie land. Just as he was working his way back into the good graces of the Aggies, I think he is now back to being Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, maybe he's in the top graces of the Aggies fans after a loss 24-20 in a game that, Paul, you're right. None of us had any expectations for the Aggies coming in. Las Vegas had them as 24 to 24 and a half point underdogs. Yet there was Haynes King at the 2-yard line and a chance to do the unthinkable and shock Alabama. Now, here's where I'm at with Johnny Manziel, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd be saying on October 9th. The play call was brutal. We were sitting in studio. Jesse, Joey, and I were sitting in studio. They timeout. They call the timeout. Everybody's hyped up. Here we go. A chance for an upset for the ages. And then that play runs, and all of us just kind of groan. We're like, oh, that's the call? And there's nothing more annoying in college football than when you have a chance to dare to be great, and then that happens.
And
And go ahead, Paul.
it reminded me a couple of years ago. Remember Mac Brown had a chance to beat Clemson with a two
Yes.
point. It was like the same call, I think. I mean, it made no sense, and it's not fair to Aggies, and certainly we don't ever want to be unfair to our friends in Aggie land,
Never.
but it's just that's all people. I mean, Matt, thanks to guys like you, we live in a sports center world where we see 4 highlights from the game, and that's all we know. But even if we watch the game, that's all we remember.
And there was so much, like, if you're an Alabama fan, I would love, and you'll get this on your show throughout the week. Are you happy you escaped because Bryce Young didn't play and you escaped 4 turnovers, most since I think 2015 or 17? I think it was 2015 against Ole Miss. Are you happy you escaped? Are you concerned that this is the second time this year you've been taken to the end by a team from Texas? Or what's your mindset going in? And if you're Texas A&M, are you thinking, hey, maybe it's not as bad as we thought? Or you wake up this morning again, just absolutely furious that you lost a game you probably shouldn't have lost. And that's what makes this so fun for me, Paul, is that A&M had no business being in that game.
Yeah.
And yet you could probably sit here this morning and say they probably could have and should have won.
Yeah. And Matt, since May 19th, I wish I had collected and gotten $1 for every call from an Alabama fan saying Jimbo's in for an ass whipping. Well, that's not exactly what we saw last night. And I just had my mind was racing. If they win this game, it is going to be Armageddon, at least where I live and work. Because I mean, you can't find you could not have found a more brutal loss for Nick Saban after all of this. And he escapes. Now he doesn't escape for long, and I'll put a pause on that for a second. But I think the takeaway from this is smart decision to keep Bryce Young out of the game, as it turned out.
Yeah.
Although it looked like he was getting pretty close to coming back in, which makes no sense. And what is he going to be like? Because if this was a tough game, just wait till next week. because what I saw in Baton Rouge yesterday, I mean, that was scary when you think about this Tennessee team. I don't care if it was a day game, night game, middle of the night, parking lot at Walmart. I mean, that was just that was hard to watch if you were sitting there wearing purple and gold.
Yeah, we'll switch to Tennessee LSU in one moment. I do want to ask you this before we move on from Alabama, Texas A&M. Texas A&M now 3 losses on the season. Appalachian State, Mississippi State, and Alabama. You had a phone call in your show the prior week that went viral about the fan talking about price per head relative to buyouts. What now do you believe will be the temperature Sunday, October 9th for Jimbo in a game that they far exceeded everyone's expectations?
I think that will be it, Matt. And I think mostly you'll hear good from that part of the world because of what almost happened. I think a blowout. I don't think any result other than winning would have really moved the needle very much for Jimbo Fisher. I think he's sitting there. You look at the defense and you go, man, this could really be good. There's enormous talent here. You don't know what to make out of the offense. And I thought, I mean, Jimbo just can't. Sometimes Jimbo can't stay out of his own way. And when he was reacting, all the people that weren't in the game, we didn't have the left tackle, we didn't have this guy, and
Yeah.
we had a backup quarterback, which I think is truly one of the most disingenuous comments I've ever heard. When you just have to go back 6 weeks to remember that Haynes King was the starting quarterback uh, by Jimbo Fisher's decision, not by yours or mine. And now he's trying to match Nick Saban for excuses by saying, well, we had a backup quarterback. Only for those who don't follow Texas A&M football, because Texas A&M's backup quarterback got hurt. But
Yeah.
that's Jimbo, and I don't think there'll be a net gain or loss too much, other than the fact that he now has 3 losses. Matt, that's the hard part, and he almost has to roll the rest of the season, I think, with maybe only one more, just to escape with a typical Jimbo Fisher Texas A&M 8-4 record. Uh, Nothing is going to matter at the end of the season. I know last week we're free associating, but yeah, Jimbo Fisher is going to turn the page to next year, regardless of what the record is here. And if you're an optimist, you saw some optimism last night. But if you're on his back, you're piling up the chips against him.
Yeah, this is one of those where if you do follow Texas A&M football and nationally, I think one of the big stories with Jim. Look, first of all, they were overranked to start the season.
Yeah.
Anyone who knew college football knew that because they're a young team. We know they recruit. We know they've got one of the top 10 classes, the number one classes a year ago. Kids don't just come from high school and just go dominate the SEC as true freshmen. Maybe one here and there. So, look, this year I think is more about expectations that were put on them by the media who maybe didn't do all their research on who was coming back for A&M. And now reality setting in. Maybe they are 7-5, 8-4, young team with an opportunity going into next year. Not the case for Alabama, because we've said for a while now, potentially this could be talent-wise, name-wise, Will Anderson Jr., Bryce Young, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jermaine Burton, Dallas Turner, all these guys coming back. Could be one of the more talented teams Nick Saban has. Again, I said it a second ago, second game this year where a team from Texas is giving them fits. And you said it was a good segue to LSU Tennessee, because now it sets up the matchup in Knoxville, where if you're coming into that game, Paul, who do you think is more confident with how they're playing right now? Alabama or Tennessee? I think it's the Volunteers by a long shot. They should feel like they could play and beat Alabama based on what we've seen.
And Matt, I think they believe that based on what we saw yesterday. And I don't want to make too much out of the whole Tiger Stadium stuff, day or night, because I don't. I think that stuff is more easy, lazy fodder for people in our business than for the fans. I don't. I mean, that game, the time of the game, the time of the day that game was played yesterday would really had no impact as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what difference would have made it if LSU fans had gassed up with bourbon for 12 more hours. The players on the field still looked like they didn't know where they were. And Brian Kelly, love him. I mean, he comes up with some of the most inexplicable situations to put his team in. But when you fumble the opening kickoff, you're
Yeah.
going to lose, and you're going to lose badly against a good team. And as long as Hendon Hooker is around, and he's playing shorthanded too. Tillman was out. They had a lineman out. That wasn't Tennessee's best. The only thing I'm concerned about, and I know this game. I grew up on this game, Matt, the Tennessee Alabama game, and I know that the nation will get a good chortle here. But this used to be the biggest game of the SEC
Yeah.
for a long time. I mean, you planned your year around this weekend, especially in Knoxville, coming
Yep.
in mid October, um, and this game has been a joke for many years. I mean, I've argued this isn't even a rivalry anymore. Well, it is right. It is right now, and Tennessee fans survived 2 weeks ago with Florida because the expectation, you knew they were going to win that game, and you were afraid the hand over your face. There's not going to be any stopping that. Tennessee fans are back in their mind, and they are going to be beating their chests, and they want Bama so badly. It's hard to put into common English the desire to beat Alabama. It's only been 2006 since the last win.
That is incredible. 16 years in a game that brings us Peyton Manning and T. Martin and Phil Fulmer. And I mean, you're right. This was the game because it pit one division against another. It was the Orange versus the Houndstooth. It was historic championship caliber programs trying to see who was going to dominate the South for the rest of the year.
And Matt, I'll go back in history, and I know when I was a young writer, I hated the old sports show. Well, you remember back in '57? Well, I will tell you because I was in the infancy of my career in Birmingham as a sports writer, and Bear Bryant, he was 69 years old. That's 2 years younger than Nick Saban will be in a couple of weeks, and he looked about 40 years older than Nick Saban looks right now. And he took the number 2 ranked team in the country, which very well may be the ranking when we don't know yet because we're doing this in the middle of the night, or so it seems, to Knoxville, and Tennessee ended a 9-game losing streak on that October day 40 years ago this week. And Matt, there's some establishments on the Strip in Knoxville that still haven't recovered. I mean, they carried the goalpost down the street. They mobbed. I mean, it was one of the scenes of the century at Neyland Stadium, and you could very well see the same thing this Saturday afternoon.
Why don't we, as a national media who specializes in this sport and leaning towards south of the Mason-Dixon line, why aren't we giving Josh Heupel more credit for what he's done? Because let me refresh everybody's memory. Laughed at, booed at, get out of here before he was hired. They didn't think the UCF coach was qualified enough to be the coach of Tennessee. Yet in year two now, he has Tennessee in the top 10 and ready to go toe-to-toe with Big Bad Alabama.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but Matt, that's what we do here on but I'll try to tell this story quickly because it's complicated. But most people know Josh Heupel was a Heisman runner-up at Oklahoma. He led the Sooners to a national championship. He was the offensive play caller there, and it ended badly. I mean, really badly. I don't know if he's been back since he left. I mean, and he struggled and he resurrected his career. I bring this up only to you juxtapose what happened in Baton Rouge, and then you go to the West to Dallas yesterday. And I just wonder out loud, which is dangerous sometimes on this podcast, what some of the big fat cat Oklahoma Sooners are thinking right now, because I think they're stuck with Brent Venables. I mean, this guy does not look like he's ready for prime time, and Josh Heupel does because he got his training wheels on at UCF, and it was a struggle, and he had some growing pains, but it would be a cross to bear, but and nothing's happening right now. But I'm just saying, I in my mind, you have to think some Oklahoma boosters are going, man, we got to figure this out somehow down the road because Brent Venables does not look like he's long for the job, and Josh Heupel has emerged as one of the best coaches in America.
Yeah, because what you have now, Paul, is you've got Heupel. He's what do high school players want? High school recruits, they want offense. You've got one of the most exciting offenses. NIL is not a problem in Knoxville. You're in the SEC. Conversely, if you're Oklahoma, if you're a defensive guy, I mean, that was my biggest concern for Oklahoma now moving forward. It's not like you lost 13-0
No,
and your offense couldn't move the ball. You got beat 49-0 and pummeled for the second consecutive week.
no, and I mean, I mean, we joke about dog years. I mean, that 49-0 in that rivalry game. I mean, Matt, you've been there. I mean, I can't even come up with a real live number of what that means. I mean, Venable's credibility. I was with an Oklahoma fan yesterday at the airport, and I mean, I wasn't even joking, and the guy looked like he wanted to stand up and fight. I mean, I was just saying, man, I just caught the score. I mean, I didn't want. I mean, I know these guys, and they were so in on him, like, and they were laughing. Remember, laughing at Lincoln Riley and all the accusations. And I mean, and let me just repeat, Joe Castiglione, best athletic director in the country, right? Well, he hired Brent Venables, and there was always rumblings about, why didn't Brent Venables take that job, or why didn't he take that job? Maybe he was waiting for this job. I don't know, but if he turns this thing around, then good for him. But don't. It won't happen this year, but don't be surprised if some Okie decides, you know what, maybe it's time to ameliorate the bad feelings with Josh Heupel, and then back up with. I mean, by the way, breaking news: Oklahoma is heading to the SEC, and they're heading to the SEC with who? Brent Venables. Well, one of their most famous alums is in Knoxville. Does that make any sense?
The guy that won them a national championship for Bob Stoops. I mean, you're talking about a native son who Bob Stoops had to let go, which, by the way, paves the way for Lincoln Riley to come in. And then you see what Lincoln's doing with Mario Williams and Caleb Williams at USC, two Oklahoma transfers. I had said it on the Sunday Bloody Sunday show that it was rock bottom for Oklahoma. And you know this better than anyone. You can get, and congratulations to Sark, because there was people, we know Texas, people get impatient. Quinn Ewers is back, but you know this better than anyone, Paul. If you're in year one as a coach, you get certain passes, right? The one pass you don't get is what happened yesterday at the State Fairgrounds of Texas, because now you're bringing out everybody when you just got embarrassed by the team you hate most.
Yeah, and that's your drafting partner to the SEC, which I do believe will happen in 24. So that's not a long way off anymore. So we're one more season, and Stark won the game he had to win, and he almost beat Alabama. So this is not about the final score for you newcomers to this podcast. This is about recruiting right now. And if you're one of those top players in Dallas at all the premier schools or somewhere, and you're looking at that team yesterday at Oklahoma, and you're going, I want to play for that guy. Listen, I'm not diminishing Oklahoma. It's one of the premier football schools in the country, but they don't have one of the premier coaches right now.
And I don't want to pile on Venables too much, but if you go way back pre-Bob Stoops, there was a guy by the name of John Blake who came in as the head coach of Oklahoma. He was a recruiter. Everybody was all excited about it. That was so bad it ended quickly, paved the way for Bob Stoops to come in to have to rebuild the proud Oklahoma program that was under Barrie Switzer. And it's certainly too early to make that distinction with Brent Venables in Oklahoma, but that was a bad look for the Sooners.
But if this was a Fortune 500 company and you're early in your career, and I mean, this is essentially the investor meeting. Essentially, Brent Venables went into the stockholders meeting where everybody who owns stock in your company, and as he started to address them on what kind of year they're expecting, he like throws up, and I mean, that's 49-0 to your biggest and most hated rival, who you're joining to go to the SEC. So you can clean up the vomit, but it's hard to get the stench. It's hard to get the stench out.
The stench is going to be there for quite some time. I'll get you out of here on this one because we'll play that game now because we accidentally did this. But stock up. I'm buying stock in Ole Miss. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a plane and somebody said, "Oh, Ole Miss is down to Vanderbilt." I said, "Slow down." Games for Ole Miss are starting to get very premium. They got Auburn this week, and we won't waste time on Brian Harsin. If he has not been fired by the time this podcast hits air, that's Auburn's loss, not ours. But he should be at this point. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. But clearly, if he hasn't gone today, he'll go after the Ole Miss game, and then Ole Miss goes to LSU, which is, I don't think that sounds all that difficult, but it's another, and you're going to have to calm Ole Miss fans from saying, quit looking ahead to Alabama in November. That's how far this program is moving along. I was in Starkville over the weekend. That's another program that looks really potent. Not to start plugging the Egg Bowl, but that's really going to be interesting. And without Will Levis, Kentucky, all the games we thought they might wreak havoc, I'm not sure. But Ole Miss is a team that, and give Lane Kiffin credit.
Absolutely.
I mean, he had Matt Corral last year. He had a lot of other key players. I mean, he just hit the reboot button with a whole new team. And it's like a fantasy football team that you have to get rid of everybody, and that's a remarkable coaching job.
So Paul and I have put all of our stock money in the state of Mississippi. Unfortunately, Paul, we got to sell our stock in Arkansas and Sam Pittman. I mean, I had some hog stock to start the year.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't get. I mean, I got rid of it at the end. I mean, I was giving it away just to get it off my books. But yeah, I mean, I was out in Arkansas a couple of times this year, and I felt like they were a 9-3 team at minimum. And I still love the guy. He's great for the business, but they have BYU next.
Well, and BYU lost to Notre Dame in Las Vegas yesterday. Arkansas, weird trip out to Provo in the middle of the season. I don't know who scheduled that game and how they scheduled it, but perhaps they should look at him the next board meeting.
It was the former guy, I'm told, by the present guy.
Okay, yeah, because he's probably like, "Don't put this on me. I want nothing to do with this."
The guy that went to Kansas and hired Les Miles is the guy who scheduled this game.
It's all you need to know about connecting those dots with what's left for Arkansas. What a week 6 it was. You can bet next Sunday right here. I cannot wait to see what Tennessee, Alabama delivers for us, Paul, because you're right. Historically, this is one of the best games. It hasn't been so in 16 years. Let's just hope we get a good game in Knoxville.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm heading up there as I think everyone else in the world is. And Matt, again, somebody who grew up in that state and went to school there, it's just nice to see because it's too rich of a rivalry to see, put at 11 o'clock in the morning like it has too often. And I mean, by the way, there's only been since 06. It's not like we've had a lot of really good games. I mean, there was that one famous game in 09 where Mount Cody, remember, blocked the field goal to preserve Alabama's national championship run. Lane Kiffin was the coach in the last time Tennessee had a legitimate shot at beating Alabama. One or two other games that were mildly interesting, but mostly they've been 55-14.
Oof. Well, let's hope we don't get that this week as the entire company of ESPN makes the trip to Knoxville. Paul, as always, we appreciate your time. And as always, to you, the beautiful viewer, thank you for watching us here on our Sunday recap on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.